So I have covered a lot of criminal cases over the years. I've commented on a lot of criminal cases over the years. And most of these cases never go to trial. Upwards of 90% never go to trial. Somebody takes a plea. Occasionally, someone actually chooses to roll the dice and actually go to trial. I give credit, by the way, to anybody who chooses to go to trial in this day and age. I really do. Because the easy thing to do is avoid a trial and take a plea. The easier thing to do is to, instead of going to trial, become a cooperating witness or a confidential informant for federal prosecutors, because more often than not, they will then be willing to look the other way on whatever crimes you've committed. Now, in the trials that I have observed, almost all of them have featured informants and cooperating witnesses playing a central role. And on more than one occasion, I have seen cooperating witnesses lie under oath. I've seen them repeatedly perjure themselves. And there's very little repercussions, if any, for these lying informants. Somebody that wants to change some of that is Dominick Crea. Dominick Crea is an interesting guy. He is a podcaster and the founder of something called Justice Technology Professionals. Dominick, it's been too long. Good morning. Thanks for joining me on the radio.
Good morning, Frank. Thank you for having me on again, sir.
Dominick, for people that aren't familiar with you, what exactly is Justice Technology Professionals?
We're a litigation support firm, which basically means we just assist counsel and the attorneys and their clients to prepare for trial throughout all stages of getting indicted all the way up to trial.
So if I'm indicted and I choose to go to trial, my lawyer, he hires your team and you guys help prepare for the trial.
That's correct.
Okay. And you got a great YouTube channel. People could just search Justice Tech Pros and you do some great videos on there. Now, you also have a pretty personal connection with the criminal justice system, don't you?
That's correct.
What is that?
Yes, the last case I was involved in was my father's case, and he went to trial with 3 other gentlemen, and unfortunately they were wrongfully convicted, and a lot of that conviction was attributed to informants who were getting on the stand and telling out-and-out lies. And the reason I knew they were lying is because a lot of the statements were contradicting to the facts of the case, to a lot of the discovery evidence, and then to even go further with that, after the trial, several of these informants started podcasts, and they would go on the podcast and tell stories, and a lot of their stories that they were telling, again, conflicted with 302s and proffer sessions and trial testimony.
If people don't know, a 302 is basically an FBI agent's notes about conversations that he has with informants. They're recorded in something called a 302, and then that's disclosed to the defense. So then if they tell a different story on the stand or in the public afterwards, you know that they told the FBI agent they were speaking to a different story. Now, your father's in prison now?
Correct.
And how long is his prison sentence?
It's a life sentence. Him and the 3 other gentlemen who were found guilty.
All right. Well, we'll talk about your father's case another day. But
sure.
What is the problem with how cooperating witnesses and informants are used in the criminal justice system today? I think, and look, I have a history, rightly so, and a reputation as being very pro-defense. But I think everybody, even the staunchest pro-defense person, recognizes that you do need to use cooperating witnesses and confidential informants from time to have some knowledge about what goes on when it comes to criminal activity, especially conspiracies. What's the problem with how informants and cooperated witnesses are used today?
Well, the problem I'm seeing is the honesty factor. A lot of these informants are being promised things, benefits, and huge bonuses, so to speak, in exchange for their testimony, and they're not being held accountable for their own issues in exchange for testifying against a higher target. So what's happening is they're making the prize, so to speak, so much so that you're finding a lot of informants are just telling the prosecutor and their handler what they want to hear, and they're going with facts that aren't accurate. They're out and out lies. They're going with tales that are just tall tales, and they're kind of giving as much information that they can that they think the prosecution wants to hear, not based on reality and not based on fact.
Now, when I've watched a lot of criminal trials, when the prosecutor is questioning the cooperating witness on direct examination, towards the end of the testimony, it's the same script every time. The prosecutor asks the cooperating witness something like, what is your understanding of what your obligation is here today? The cooperating witness says, my understanding of the agreement is that I have to tell the truth. Have you been promised anything for giving your testimony here today? No. Do you have any expectation of what your sentence will be after your testimony here today? Answer, always no. What is your understanding of what will happen if you lie here today? And the cooperating witness always says, like they're reading from a script, it's my understanding that they'll tear up my cooperation agreement. Now, in all of the years of trial watching that I've done, and it's substantial, I have seen witness after witness lie, and not once have I ever heard a cooperating agreement be torn up. Have you noticed, have you seen that line of questioning, and have you noticed the same thing?
Yes, and also I have a problem with that, shtick that they give. It sounds great that they're not expecting anything in exchange for their return, but on the federal level, the truth is what happens is they get what's called a 5K1 letter, and the prosecution gives the 5K1 letter to the judge after their testimony, and basically it's a glowing review about the informant. They'll tell the judge everything they helped them do, all the high-profile targets they may have helped them convict. So I always say I'd like to see the statistics on what the informant was facing versus what he or she received after the 5K1 letter was used and was contemplated by the judge. And pretty much 10 out of 10 times that I have seen, that letter has a lot of power in it. So that letter does offer where you see a judge give somebody a slap on the wrist.
I mean, it's a get-out-of-jail-free card. Let's be honest. That 5K1 letter is a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Exactly. That's why I think they kind of play with words when they say that to the jury, and they're saying, well, you're not getting anything in exchange, and that's just not reality. That's not how it plays out.
No, it certainly is not. Now, but explain that to folks. How, if the cooperating witness enters into a plea agreement or a cooperation agreement with the prosecutor and the FBI and the Department of Justice, how do they then lie and get away with just time served? How does that happen? Explain to the uninitiated who might be listening.
Well, what happens is they get on the stand, they tell their story, they put on a good routine. The prosecution will make sure they have many rehearsal sessions where they'll have the informant on and they'll go through the motions, ask them all the questions, dress them up so they really look presentable. They give a good performance, and then if they get the conviction, then they lived up to their end of the bargain, and that will make it into the 5K1 letter. But on the defense side, when you start seeing the contradictions based on motions that were submitted pre-trial, based on discovery, where they're saying they had something on tape that they never had, and it's a little frustrating in a lot of ways because a lot of these discovery information is always housed under a protective order. So you can never really talk about it. So even on my podcast, I can't go into details on certain things where I could explain how I know somebody's lying and compare it to the court transcripts based on the 302s because you can't really talk about those things. But what happened was, which I'm sure you noticed in recent times, you have all these different informants. I think it's almost like the informant playbook, where after they're done informing, they want to do a YouTube career or a podcast career. And there's podcasts popping up left and right with all these informants. And if you pay attention and you start listening just to the podcasts, you'll see a lot of contradicting stories, a lot of events that changed, a lot of details that changed just from listening from their own words within the podcast. And that's kind of what spawned what I'm working on, this WePushBack movement, because I started just thinking, Well, I think this needs to come to light, and it doesn't matter what my opinion is on an informant. That's irrelevant. The way I feel for the public, at the very least, the public and potential jurors, they want the informant to tell them the truth. That's very important.
All right, we're going to talk about the WePushBack in just a second. One of the things that I learned at your website, WePushBack.com, is that, and I knew that this was pervasive, I didn't have any idea how pervasive, is you have a link to an article that shows the FBI authorized informants to break the law. Okay, well, figured there's bending of the law when you run around with criminals. The FBI authorized informants to break the law 22,800 times in 4 years. Is that accurate?
That's I put the article up, I put the citations up, and it seems to be very accurate. And that's what a part of the website's going to be. It's a hub where you could pull those information. The public could read the statistics, read the different cases. You know, it's organic, so it'll be growing. There'll be things that'll be added to it. It's really just to give the public an insight onto what goes on, because they're just not aware of these things. I see it even with my podcast. I'll get emails, I was never aware of that. I wasn't privy to that information. And I just feel it's very important for the small part I could do. It's really, I appeal to the public, potential jurors, so defendants could possibly have a more reasonable juror, a more open-minded juror who will give them a fair shot, because they understand the entire picture. And they understand now, with this little addition to the puzzle, they'll start understanding about informants, and they'll really digest who's in front of them a little bit more with quality. They'll be able to understand the person's in front of them. They'll just have a little background to not automatically assume everything out of their word is gospel.
If people are just tuning in, we're talking with Dominick Crea. He's launched a new website called WePushBack.com that's trying to push back against the way informants and cooperating witnesses are able to get away with brazen dishonesty to help send people to prison while getting a get-out-of-jail-free card for their own crimes. Now, Dominick, we know of a lot of the top echelon informants, people like Whitey Bulger, Greg Scarpa, Frankie Blue Eyes Sparacco, people that were able to commit horrible crimes with the consent and, in some cases, the assistance of their FBI handlers. We've also seen other instances where informants, the recent plot, and that's air quotes, plot, to kidnap the governor of Michigan comes to mind, where informants are actually the tip of the spear in getting a criminal conspiracy going. From what you've observed, how often are the informants, the people that are working with and in some cases being paid by the federal government, how often are they the ones that are actually the tip of the spear to get a crime started?
Oh, very often. In the few cases I've worked on, they were pretty much the wheel that started everything going. They're the ones who are going out there and initiating the crimes a lot of the time. In the last case I was on, you have informants on tape actually trying to convince people to get involved in drug dealing, and you hear the defendants on tape, I want nothing to do with that, and they're pushing the issue. So I've seen it play out a few times on several cases I was involved in.
And are informants paid generally?
Yes. Again, one of the cases I was involved, they were going when the defense had the informants on the stand and they were going over cross-examination, they were rambling off all the numbers that they were receiving. And we're talking big numbers, hundreds of thousands. You have informants who the government was paying their child support, paying their rent, paying for automobiles, paying for their travel. You're talking all different expenses. One informant on tape that was paid in trial was talking to the agent through his wire how he wants to get a cashmere sweater, and they're negotiating about getting him a cashmere sweater. I've seen it all.
Do we have any idea how much the FBI or the taxpayers spend paying informants?
No, everything I've seen, they keep that pretty much low key. The last article that I found with some numbers, which I posted on the site, was from 2014, and it was over $500 million that were spent on the confidential informants. I don't know what it is now. We're in 2022. I haven't seen any current numbers, but that was the last big figure that I saw that was spent in 1 year.
So what exactly is WePushBack.com? Explain that to our listeners and explain what you're trying to achieve exactly.
Absolutely. Basically, I had my podcast for 2.5 years. You and I spoke about it in the past. And within the last, I would say, 10 months, about 10 months ago, I started noticing channels popping up. There was different channels popping up that were focusing on the informants, which I referred to earlier, all these different informants who have their podcasts. And you had a lot of these littler channels popping up, and they were just pointing out the inconsistencies and the lies based on things they have seen, based on past episodes maybe that the informant has done, interviews, because they're all over. They're trying to be famous, so they're doing a lot of interviews. So a lot of individuals were just doing their own podcast, calling out all these different inconsistencies and basically calling them out on their nonsense and talking about it and bringing it to the public's attention. So there was several of these podcasters. So I figured a good way that's a win-win for everybody is I wanted to create a hub. And what the hub would be is the WePushBack.com. And it would bring people, because now you have different platforms. Now you have all the content creators on YouTube or on different podcasts. Now you're entering the arena in the web space where you're just gaining more traffic. You're getting SEO results. You're bringing people to this hub. So now when they go to the hub, they could see all the different members, see all the different content. People get new listeners, new subscribers listening to their content, all while bringing attention to this issue. And also, which was very important to me, is I wanted to give those impacted by these lying informants a voice. So they could call if they want to come and contradict something, if they want to come and talk about something. Because if you listen to a lot of episodes these informants do, I mean, not only do they put people away, then they go on these episodes, they bash defendants. Right. I hear them laughing at people. Mm-hmm. I heard one informant.
They also laugh about the victims sometimes, right. Their own victims.
That's right. That's right. And you hear them laughing about how crazy they are. You know, they all got to say how they're so tough and they're killers and they kill everybody. It's really just a big, like, bluff session. And it's disturbing when you hear it. And you have all these families. You have family members of the defendants affected. And they have to sit there and hear lies about their family members being told day in, day out, people being made fun of. And I figured, okay, no matter how flat you make a pancake, it's always got two sides. So it's time for the other side to be heard.
So basically what WePushBack.com is a central hub that serves as, if I have a YouTube channel where I expose the lies of an informant, you would house it or link to it on WePushBack.com.
And it's not just for that. It's really about the ideology. A lot of our channels that are part of our hub do things that aren't even related. And I think that adds the value of it, because we'll have channels that talk about music. We have channels that talk about mental health. There's a channel that the gentleman just focuses on helping kids. But the overall theme, they'll hashtag WePushBack. They'll bring it up every once in a while, and the impact. And what I like about that is just not constantly, then it turns into white noise. If you have all these podcasts just talking about the same thing day in, day out, it's white noise. It gives a different spectrum. So it brings in viewers, it brings in the public, and the overall goal is to just give the public the information. Just let the public go listen to the two different sides and then decide where they feel who's telling the truth and who is not. So the hub kind of draws everybody in. It brings everybody to the different content creators that are members. And all that we have in common, we all align with the same core belief. We may not agree with informants. We may not like the concept of, not being accountable, and you want to distribute somebody else to take the fall for something you may have done. But the bottom line is the lies are the problem. When they're not telling the truth, they're putting people away based on their lies. We all come together based on that. And this is in its infancy stage. It's only a few months old, and it's building. We're getting members. I sent out a bunch of T-shirts with the website on it to bring traffic. We have listeners and supporters posting pictures all over social media, wearing the shirts. We push back. So it's just right now, it's in the infancy stages where we're just bringing attention to it. And it's organic. I'm sure it will grow. We'll be using the hub for different things. And the overall theme is really just bringing attention to the criminal justice system, how it works, what goes on with these lying informants, how it impacts defendants, in hopes that the public starts gaining knowledge and starts, when they sign up for jury duty, they take it seriously and they have an open mind.
Is there a risk that this could lead to a sort of internet vigilantism with certain witnesses who some people claim are not telling the truth being terrorized by everybody? I don't know, by their neighbors or anybody else?
Well, it goes both ways. I mean, there's a risk right now of family members, defendants getting abused, getting tormented. You got to see the comments that they leave under all these informants' pages, abusing people, calling people murderous lowlives, without even knowing the facts of the case, just going by what the informant's saying. So they've been on here for years and years doing that. Now, if we're just giving another side to it, and we're just saying, okay, that's their story, we're going to show that they're not telling the truth. We're going to show the inconsistencies. We're going to show their true persona, because that's another thing. In court, they always try to put on their best behavior. But when you see them on YouTube, it's a whole different personality. And I know I'm going to face a lot of adversity. I already have. You got to see some of the comments I get. I had an informant spiral out of control. He went on another podcaster's show. Who's an informant supporter, and that's fine. That's what he does. And on the show, he's actually saying they want to have RICO charges against myself and the whole WePushBack movement.
Wow.
And I find that funny because for all these years, nobody pushed back on them. They've just been talking. By the way, there's never been a problem.
Dominick, and we're almost out of time here.
Yes.
But this is totally nonpartisan, right? You could be a Republican, a Democrat, liberal, conservative, and embrace the notion of holding informants accountable, right?
Exactly.
Very quickly,
it's for everybody.
Before we run out of time, this was the word from legendary Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz on the WePushBack movement.
In my almost 60-year experience as a criminal defense lawyer, I have learned that lying informants are unfortunately all too common in our criminal justice system. These informants not only sing, they often compose. They make up stories because implicitly prosecutors send a message. Sometimes it's not an explicit message, but a message. The better your information for us, the more we can do for you. And this inclines many, many informers to elaborate on their story, to make up information about innocent people. And it's very important to expose this and to let juries and judges and legislatures and the general public know about the dangers of using informers. Informers' information should really always have to be corroborated by a non-informer testimony or documentary or other evidence. Even that's often not enough of a protection because a smart informer can tailor his or her testimony to the existing true evidence and just make it stronger and more pro-prosecution. So, look, nobody wants to see the innocent falsely convicted. Our system literally goes back to the Bible and to Blackstone, better 10 guilty go free than one innocent be wrongly confined. The extensive use and promises to informants undercuts that traditional approach to criminal law. So it's important to fight back against it.
Dominick, sounds like quite an endorsement there. Please keep us posted on this and let us know any news that develops in the WePushBack movement.
Absolutely. And as always, thank you very much for having me on, Frank.
Sure thing. It's my pleasure. Check out the website, WePushBack.com. If you know of somebody that has a podcast or a YouTube page or a blog that fits with this, maybe you hook up with these guys, WePushBack.com. I'll take your calls next, 800-848-9222. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.